Meet Henry, a missionary man who just arrived from the UK to one of the remote villages in Africa for a missionary purpose. He was rejected, scorned and beaten by the villagers because of his different tradition and willingness to make a change. Day by day, Henry fought against their doubts, each challenge revealing more of his determination and hard work. It was then he met Chidinma, a compassionate soul who falls in love with him and got to believe in him. The villagers were not prepared for their action and were shocked by what they did. If it is your first time here, then take a moment to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell to be notified of our next upload. Now let's dive into the full story. It was a quiet, humid morning in the village when Henry arrived. The air buzzed with the sounds of early risers preparing for the day, women fetching water from the river, and men gathering for the morning hunt. For as long as anyone could remember, life in this remote African village had followed the same routine, untouched by the outside world. That is, until the arrival of the white-skinned stranger. Henry stepped off the small boat that had brought him across the river, his pale skin glowing almost ghost-like in the morning sun. He was dressed in simple worn clothes, his hair sandy and his eyes a clear, piercing blue that caught the villagers' attention immediately. He held a tattered Bible close to his chest, his only shield against the stares of disbelief and fear that greeted him. Whispers rippled through the crowd as villagers stopped what they were doing, mesmerized by the sight of him. Children hid behind their mothers, peering out cautiously, while the elders exchanged wary glances, speaking in hushed tones. Some speculated that Henry was a ghost, a spirit from another realm who had come to haunt them. Others believed he was a curse sent to test their faith and patience. Henry felt the tension but chose to stand tall, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and apprehension. He had traveled thousands of miles from his home in Europe, driven by a calling he couldn't ignore. He had come to share his faith, hoping to build bridges across cultures and bring hope to the village. But as he looked around, he sensed that this mission would be more challenging than he'd ever imagined. He attempted a smile, raising his hand in a gentle wave, but the gesture only made the villagers recoil further. His unfamiliar skin and strange language seemed alien to them, and he could sense their distrust. Undeterred, he took a few steps forward, hoping that someone might approach him. But the crowd only parted further, widening the space between them. It became clear to him that they wouldn't come near. In their eyes he was an outsider, a stranger whose intentions were unclear, and for now they wanted nothing to do with him. Henry sighed, clutching his Bible tighter. This was going to be a test of patience, faith, and resilience. As he made his way through the village, the whispers followed him, but no one dared to speak directly to him. Alone and isolated, he felt the weight of his task sink heavily on his shoulders. But his spirit remained unbroken, and he resolved to stay, no matter how long it took to earn their trust. Days passed, and Henry's situation did not improve. He tried his best to communicate, using gestures and simple signs, but the language barrier was an impenetrable wall. The villagers seemed determined to maintain their distance, keeping their conversations private whenever he was nearby. He set up a small camp on the outskirts of the village, where he could pray and find solitude away from the wary eyes. Each day, he ventured into the village, hoping to speak to someone, hoping that a kind soul might take pity on him. Yet every attempt to bridge the gap was met with silent avoidance or fearful glares. Children taunted him from a safe distance, calling him the ghost man and throwing stones at his feet. He tried to smile through the hurt, but each rejection pierced him a little deeper. The villagers' prejudice ran deep, and they viewed his attempts to connect as an invasion of their world. In the evenings, Henry would sit alone by a small fire, praying and seeking strength. His once strong faith was beginning to waver under the weight of loneliness and isolation. He asked God why he had been sent here if he was only to be treated as an outcast. But the silence that surrounded him was his only answer. One night, as he sat under the stars, bruised and tired, Henry made a promise to himself. No matter how difficult he would stay, he would continue his mission, trusting that God had brought him here for a reason. He resolved to endure to prove his sincerity, even if he was seen as nothing more than a ghost. The following morning, he rose with a new resolve. He would do whatever it took, even if it meant spending months, years even, in this hostile environment. And so, he continued his daily attempts to connect, praying that one day, someone might see him for who he truly was. Not a ghost, but a man with a purpose. Weeks turned into months, and Henry's situation grew increasingly difficult. He had started rationing his food, relying mostly on what he could gather from the land, but hunger gnawed at him constantly. The loneliness was even worse. He'd hoped that, by now, some of the villagers might have come around, but they continued to keep their distance, and the rumors about him being a ghost only seemed to grow stronger. But one evening, when he'd nearly lost all hope, something changed. As he sat by his small fire, staring into the flames, he noticed a shadow moving toward him. He squinted, his heart racing with a mixture of hope and fear. In the dim light, he saw a young woman standing a few feet away, carrying a small woven basket. She looked around nervously, as if worried someone might see her, but then she stepped forward, placing the basket beside him. Henry looked up, surprised and grateful. He saw kindness in her eyes, a softness he hadn't seen in anyone else's since he'd arrived. She motioned for him to open the basket, and when he did, he found a small loaf of bread and some fruit. He looked back at her, overwhelmed with gratitude. He tried to speak, but she held a finger to her lips, signaling for him to stay quiet. It was clear she didn't want anyone to know she was helping him. Over the next few nights, the young woman, whose name was Chidinma, returned. Each time, she brought a little more food, and eventually, she began staying a bit longer, watching him eat in silence. Henry tried to communicate his thanks, gesturing with his hands, and she would smile shyly, nodding in understanding. Slowly, they developed a form of silent communication. She would bring him food, and he would attempt to teach her simple signs, showing her words like thank you and friend. Chidinma was a quick learner, and as she grew more comfortable, she began to gesture back, showing him that she wanted to learn more. In time, Henry found himself looking forward to these brief visits, his heart swelling with newfound hope. Chidinma was the first person to see beyond his skin, beyond the rumors and fears. Her kindness was a light in his dark world, and he clung to it like a lifeline. But they both knew that if anyone discovered their secret meetings, there would be trouble. Chidinma's family, like the rest of the village, saw Henry as a threat, a mysterious outsider who had no place among them. Yet, despite the risks, Chidinma continued to visit him, bringing him not only food but a warmth he hadn't felt in months. For the first time since his arrival, Henry felt that maybe, just maybe, he could find a place here. As the weeks passed, Henry and Chidinma's bond grew stronger. Their gestures and signs became more elaborate, forming a language of their own, one built on understanding and empathy. Every evening, as the village settled into sleep, Chidinma would sneak out to meet Henry. They would sit together under the stars, sharing stories without words, finding comfort in each other's company. But in a village where traditions and boundaries were rigidly upheld, their friendship was bound to stir trouble. Chidinma's family began to suspect something was amiss. Her younger brother had noticed her sneaking out, and the whispers within her household grew louder. Her father confronted her, demanding to know why she would risk her reputation for a stranger, a man they all saw as an intruder. "It's not safe, Chidinma," he warned, his voice filled with fear. "He is not one of us. He brings danger, and you would do well to stay away." But Chidinma, defiant yet respectful, tried to explain. "Father, he is not what you think. He is kind and he has no one. He only seeks to do good here." Her father, however, was unmoved. "You're putting yourself and our family at risk," he said firmly. "The people are already whispering about him, calling him a ghost and worse. They will see your kindness as betrayal." Despite her father's stern warnings, Chidinma couldn't abandon Henry. She felt a connection to him that she couldn't explain, a pull that defied her father's fears. And as their secret meetings continued, That bond deepened into something neither of them had anticipated: love. Henry, too, felt it, though he struggled with the guilt of it. He knew how difficult things were for Chidinma and that she risked everything each time she came to see him. But her kindness had rekindled a sense of purpose in him, giving him the strength to endure. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Henry reached out, taking her hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment it spoke volumes. Chidinma looked at him, her eyes wide and questioning, but she did not pull away. Instead, she held his hand, her fingers entwined with his, a silent promise between them. But love in a place bound by tradition was a dangerous thing. They both knew that if anyone discovered the depth of their feelings, there would be consequences. Yet, in that moment, under the starry sky, they dared to hope for a future together, one that defied the boundaries of culture, language, and fear. Little did they know, this forbidden love would soon bring both joy and heartbreak, challenging not only their bond but the beliefs of an entire village. Word of Chidinma's frequent disappearances soon reached the village elders, stirring deep concern. They were the guardians of tradition, and to them every custom and belief was sacred. The thought of a young woman, one of their own, associating with a stranger was seen as a potential threat to their way of life. Rumors spread like wildfire, weaving tales of dark magic and even curses that they feared Henry might bring upon the village. Chidinma, however, remained undeterred. She continued to meet Henry secretly, convinced that their bond was something pure and true. Each night, she found herself braving the growing disapproval of her family, slipping out under the cover of darkness to be with him. In these quiet hours they would sit together, Henry teaching her new signs, and she sharing stories of her people, of traditions and songs that he longed to understand. But one night, as she returned home from one of these meetings, she was met with an unexpected ambush. Her father and two of the village elders were waiting for her, their faces grave and filled with a mixture of anger and fear. "Where have you been, Chidinma?" her father demanded, his voice low but seething with intensity. Caught off guard, Chidinma stammered, searching for words that might ease his suspicion. "I was just out walking," she lied, but her father's gaze was unwavering. The elder beside him spoke, his voice edged with the authority of age. "You think we do not know, child. We have heard the whispers. You are risking your honor and the safety of this village for a stranger." Her father stepped closer, his tone softer yet more pleading. "Chidinma, you are young and you don't understand. This man is not one of us. He brings danger with him. If you continue down this path, you may bring shame upon us all." The weight of their words settled heavily on her heart, and for a moment, she felt the crushing burden of their expectations. But beneath her fear was a fierce love, a connection to Henry that she couldn't abandon. "I know him, father," she said finally, her voice strong. "He is not dangerous. He is good, and he has done nothing to harm us." Her father's face hardened, disappointment etched into every line. "Then you leave us no choice. If you continue to see him, we will have to act. This village will not suffer because of one man, nor will you shame your family. You will end this, or you will face consequences." As Chidinma turned away, she felt the weight of their warnings pressing upon her. She knew she was trapped between her love for Henry and the loyalty she held to her family and people. The choice before her felt impossible. But as she lay awake that night, she knew one thing for certain: she could not abandon Henry. Even if it meant facing the wrath of her own family, she was willing to take that risk. Days passed, and Chidinma's family kept a close watch on her, suspecting that her heart remained with the outsider. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her every move, and each day, she sensed her father's disappointment grow deeper. Yet her determination held firm, and soon, she found an opportunity to meet Henry once more. As they reunited under the shadow of an ancient tree, Henry could see the worry etched on her face. He gently took her hands, searching her eyes for answers. "They know, Henry," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "They've warned me. If I continue to see you, there will be consequences." Henry's heart ached to see her in such pain. Despite all he had endured in the village, He'd never regretted coming here, for meeting Chidinma had brought him a sense of peace he had never known. He wished he could shield her from the hardships their relationship was causing, but he knew that love demanded sacrifice. With a deep breath, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn ring that had once belonged to his mother. It was simple, made of gold, but to him it held the world. He held it out to her, his eyes full of hope and devotion. "Chidinma," he began, his voice soft yet filled with emotion. "I came here to share something meaningful, and in you I found something I never expected. I don't know if your people will ever accept me, but I know that I love you. Marry me, Chidinma. Stand by my side, and let us face whatever comes together." Chidinma stared at the ring, her heart racing with a mixture of joy and fear. The prospect of marrying Henry filled her with happiness, but she knew the challenges they would face. Marrying him would mean defying her family, defying her culture, and risking everything she'd ever known. For a long moment she was silent, but then she nodded, her heart answering where words could not. "Yes, Henry," she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "I will marry you. I will stand by you." Their hands entwined, they shared a moment of quiet unity, a promise exchanged under the stars. But as Chidinma returned home that night, the weight of her decision sank in. She knew her father would be devastated, that the village might turn against her, but her love for Henry gave her the strength she needed to face it. When Henry approached her father the following day to ask for her hand in marriage, her father was furious. The man who had raised Chidinma with such care felt betrayed, unable to understand why she would choose an outsider. Yet, after a long and heated conversation, and a carefully placed sum of money to appease her family's honor, her father finally gave his reluctant blessing. The wedding was quiet, held in secrecy to avoid drawing attention. There were no elaborate ceremonies, only a simple exchange of vows and a quiet promise to build a life together, despite the barriers between them. Chidinma had become Henry's wife, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did they know, this union would set the stage for a new chapter in their lives, one that would not only transform them but the entire village as well. News of Chidinma's marriage to Henry spread quickly throughout the village, sparking disbelief and outrage among many. To marry a man outside her culture, and an outsider who had once been viewed with suspicion, was unthinkable. Some whispered about curses that might fall upon her family, while others openly questioned how Chidinma could abandon her people's customs so easily. The village elders were among the most vocal, claiming her choice brought shame upon their heritage. They saw her marriage as a threat to their traditions, a rebellion that could encourage others to stray from their teachings. At their gathering, they discussed ways to counter the influence Henry might bring, fearing he could change the minds and hearts of their young ones. Meanwhile, Chidinma's family faced an intense backlash from their neighbors. Her father, though having reluctantly agreed to the union, now bore the weight of the village's anger and scorn. He felt torn, wondering if he had betrayed his heritage by giving in, despite knowing he had done it in part to protect Chidinma from greater harm. It was a complicated decision that left him deeply troubled. Despite the challenges, Henry and Chidinma focused on building their life together. In their small, modest home on the outskirts of the village, they found joy in each other's company and a sense of peace amidst the turmoil around them. Chidinma, while saddened by her community's reaction, remained firm in her love for Henry. She knew their bond transcended the anger and misunderstanding of others. But each day brought new trials. Young children were forbidden from visiting them, and friends Chidinma had grown up with stopped speaking to her. People avoided their path in the market, and whispers followed them wherever they went. They lived on the edges of acceptance, cast out by a community unable to understand their love. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Henry took Chidinma's hands, his face full of worry. "I know this is difficult for you, Chidinma," he said gently. "I didn't come here to cause you pain, and I don't want to keep you from your family and your home. If there is any other way, I want you to tell me." Chidinma shook her head, her eyes fierce with determination. "Henry, I chose this life with you. Whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together. I know the village will not forgive easily, but I cannot deny my heart." Her words filled Henry with hope and gratitude. He knew her sacrifice was immense, yet he felt even more determined to honor their love. The days might be harsh and the acceptance from her people distant, but they knew that together, they could withstand the storms that life threw at them. Little did they realize, however, that this was only the beginning. As they continued to face the village's rejection, Henry began to form a plan that would forever change their lives and reveal to Chidinma a side of him she had never known. In the quiet of an early morning, Henry finally spoke of his intentions to Chidinma. He explained his vision, his purpose that had brought him to this remote village. His mission was not just to bring a message of faith but also to open a path between his world and hers. He had not imagined that path would involve marriage, yet now that they were together, he saw it as a greater calling, a journey he wished to share with her. As he spoke, he hesitated before bringing up an idea he had been considering for some time. "Chidinma," he said slowly, searching her face, "would you come with me back to my homeland? I want you to see my world, my family, and my people. I believe it would give you a new perspective, and in return, I can show our people here that our love can bridge any divide." Chidinma's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had always known him as a humble man, dedicated to his mission, and his proposal opened her eyes to his longing to share more with her. Yet, the thought of leaving her homeland, even temporarily, was overwhelming. She could hardly imagine life in a distant country with a different language, surrounded by strangers. The idea of leaving her parents and the village, despite their recent estrangement, filled her with a mix of excitement and sadness. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Will they accept me as a stranger, just as you were seen here?" Henry smiled, a warmth in his eyes. "Yes, Chidinma. My people will welcome you as my wife, and you'll see that our differences can bring us together rather than keep us apart. You are my family now, and I want to share my world with you." With a deep breath she nodded. "If this is your wish, Henry, then I will go with you." Preparations for their journey were made in secret, as the couple did not wish to draw further attention. When they informed Chidinma's father of their plans, he was torn between relief and sorrow. He feared his daughter would be lost to him forever, yet part of him hoped she might find peace and prosperity in this new life. The day of their departure was quiet, with only a handful of people in the village aware of their plans. As Chidinma walked with Henry, leaving behind the life she had always known, she felt both a pang of sorrow and a glimmer of excitement. The journey to Henry's homeland was long and filled with awe for Chidinma. She marveled at the vastness of the lands, the buildings that reached toward the sky, and the endless rivers and hills she saw on their way. Henry was her guide, introducing her to new experiences and filling her with wonder at each turn. Finally, they reached their destination, and Chidinma found herself surrounded by Henry's family and friends. To her surprise, she was welcomed warmly, embraced as part of Henry's world. They admired her, spoke kindly to her, and even took time to learn her language and customs. It was a world she had never imagined, and she felt gratitude for the acceptance and love she received. In this new environment, Chidinma thrived. With Henry's guidance, she learned the language and customs, surprising even herself with how quickly she adapted. Days turned into months, and in time, she became fluent in Henry's language, even learning to speak with ease and confidence. The girl from the village had become a woman of strength and grace, respected and cherished in Henry's community. But despite her newfound happiness, she never forgot her homeland. Henry, too, remembered his original purpose and the people they had left behind. Together, they decided that their mission was not complete, and they would return to the village to fulfill the work they had started. With their hearts united in purpose and strengthened by love, Henry and Chidinma set out once more, knowing that their return would be met with both surprise and wonder. Henry and Chidinma's return to the village was quiet but marked by an air of mystery. Word quickly spread about the couple's arrival, and curiosity overtook much of the community. Chidinma, who had once been one of them, now walked with a confident stride, dressed in clothing that blended her African roots with a hint of Western influence. She spoke fluently in both her native language and English, surprising even those who had once ridiculed her. The elders, who had once viewed Henry as an outsider and a threat, now gathered to observe the couple from afar. People murmured in awe as Chidinma exchanged greetings in perfect English with Henry, her words flowing naturally. This was not the same girl who had left the village with a stranger. She had returned with a new strength, her demeanor a mix of grace and resolve. Henry, too, had changed. He was still gentle and humble, but there was a sense of purpose in his eyes as he stood beside his wife. Their appearance immediately stirred discussions. Some villagers were hesitant, recalling their previous suspicions about Henry, but others found themselves questioning their initial judgments. Many began to wonder if they had been wrong in their assumptions, as it was clear that Henry was no ghost but a devoted husband who had taken one of their own and returned her as an accomplished woman. Chidinma's family, who had endured their own share of scorn from the community for her choice, now felt a sense of vindication. Her father, who had been reluctantly complicit in her marriage, watched in awe as his daughter spoke with elegance and confidence. She greeted him warmly, showing him the respect he had feared she might forget. Though he felt a pang of regret for having doubted her, he couldn't deny his pride in the woman she had become. In an attempt to bridge the divide that had long existed, Henry called for a village meeting, hoping to finally share his mission with open hearts. As they gathered in the clearing, he stood alongside Chidinma, who served as his translator. Speaking slowly, with Chidinma relaying his words to the crowd, Henry expressed his gratitude for the kindness they had shown Chidinma despite their earlier differences. "I came to this land hoping to share knowledge, hoping to bring unity, and hoping to be understood," he said. "At first we did not understand each other, and I became a stranger to you. But in learning your ways, I have come to see the beauty of your culture, and I hope we can share in each other's journeys." The crowd listened with a mix of wonder and wariness. Some elders still held on to their skepticism, but others found themselves moved by his humility and sincerity. Henry's words, spoken through Chidinma, had a calming effect on those who had once viewed him as a threat. Chidinma's presence only strengthened his message, for she was now a bridge between their worlds, embodying the harmony Henry had hoped to create. As the villagers dispersed that evening, the initial hostility had softened, leaving behind an atmosphere of curiosity and tentative openness. For the first time, many saw Henry not as a foreign invader but as someone who had come to help, and they looked forward to seeing how his mission might benefit their lives. Yet some challenges remained. Skeptical elders were not convinced that Henry's intentions were entirely noble, and a few vocal members of the village were determined to resist any foreign influence. Still, the seeds of acceptance had been planted, and Henry and Chidinma could sense that, over time, the village might come to trust them fully. With his growing acceptance in the community, Henry felt encouraged to share more of his vision with the village. The challenges he had seen here, lack of clean water, limited access to education, and insufficient health care, reminded him of the mission he had dedicated his life to. But he also understood that any meaningful change would require the village's willingness to embrace new ideas, a task that would take both patience and trust. Henry approached the elders, requesting a council meeting to discuss ways in which he could contribute to the community's well-being. Chidinma joined him as his translator and advocate, aware that without her, his words would lack the cultural insight the elders valued. Despite lingering doubts, the elders agreed to meet, curious to hear what Henry had to offer. As the council gathered, Henry outlined his plans with a humble yet passionate tone. He spoke of his desire to help build a well for clean drinking water, to establish a school where children could learn both their native language and English, and to set up a small clinic where basic medical services could be provided. His voice carried a steady conviction, his words laced with respect for their traditions and a genuine love for the people. Chidinma, translating his words, noticed the softening expressions of the elders as they listened. Many were struck by his willingness to use his own resources to benefit the community. He wasn't asking for anything in return. His sole aim was to improve their lives. For the first time, some began to view him not as an outsider but as an ally. One elder, known for his staunch resistance to any foreign influence, raised his voice in a challenge. "Why would you do this for us? What do you gain from helping strangers in a land so far from your own?" Henry paused, choosing his words carefully. "I gain the joy of seeing lives transformed. When I met your people, I saw resilience and strength. I knew that if I could offer support, we could create a community that blends the best of both worlds. I don't come to erase your traditions or change who you are. I come to be part of a journey that can benefit us all." Chidinma's translation rang through the council with a tone of pride and faith. The elder studied Henry for a moment, his gaze softened by Henry's sincerity. Though the man did not answer, his silence signaled a quiet approval. In the following weeks, Henry and Chidinma began work on their projects. With the help of villagers who were now willing to assist, they cleared land for a well and gathered materials for a makeshift schoolhouse. Chidinma spent hours with local children, teaching them the basics of English, while Henry coordinated with volunteers to prepare for the construction of the well. As they worked, a gradual shift swept through the community. People began to visit Henry and Chidinma's home, offering food, tools, and help. Formerly skeptical neighbors began to view Henry with newfound respect, impressed by his dedication and the sacrifices he was making to improve their lives. For Chidinma, the transformation was both humbling and fulfilling. She saw in Henry's efforts the man she had always believed in, and she felt a profound joy in seeing her people begin to embrace him. It was a slow but steady journey toward acceptance, and she knew that, over time, the changes Henry was introducing would bring lasting benefits. As the well neared completion and the school became a reality, the couple felt the weight of their mission lifting. Together, they had begun a journey of transformation, one that had turned doubt into trust and division into unity. Henry's vision was no longer just his own. It had become a shared hope, a dream for a brighter future that they would build together. As the first drops of water gushed from the newly constructed well, a wave of excitement swept through the village. It was a moment that had been years in the making, a tangible result of Henry and Chidinma's tireless efforts and the community's gradual acceptance of their mission. The villagers gathered, eyes wide with anticipation, as the clear water flowed, glistening in the sunlight. Children squealed in delight, splashing each other as they filled their containers. Henry watched the scene unfold, a smile breaking across his face. This simple act of providing clean water had transformed the village. No longer would mothers walk long distances to fetch water. Now, it was readily available at their doorstep. Chidinma stood beside him, her heart swelling with pride and joy as she witnessed the relief on her neighbors' faces. This was just the beginning, she thought, glancing at Henry, who was already planning the next steps in their mission. To commemorate the occasion, the village elders proposed a celebration. It would be a feast, an acknowledgement of the water well and the new school, and a way to honor Henry and Chidinma for their contributions. The entire village buzzed with preparations, women cooking traditional dishes, men decorating the clearing with vibrant fabrics and flowers. For the first time in a long time, the atmosphere was alive with laughter and joy, with neighbors coming together as a community. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the village, the celebration kicked off. Drumming filled the air, and the sound of joyous singing resonated through the trees. Chidinma, dressed in a beautifully embroidered gown, joined the dancers, her spirit soaring as she moved to the rhythm. Henry watched, captivated by the beauty of his wife and the warmth of the community enveloping him. During the festivities, Chidinma took a moment to speak. Standing in front of the crowd, her voice clear and confident, she shared the journey they had taken to reach this point. "We are here together, not as strangers but as family," she began, her words resonating with both pride and humility. "This well represents more than just water. It symbolizes our unity, our ability to work together and overcome our differences." Her speech elicited cheers from the crowd, but Chidinma sensed the underlying tension from a few skeptics lingering in the back. As she spoke, she caught the gaze of the elder who had once challenged Henry, and for a moment their eyes locked. There was no hostility there, just a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had all taken together. After the speeches, Henry took to the stage, with Chidinma translating. I want to thank you all for your kindness and your willingness to embrace change. Together, we can build a brighter future for our children. I promise to do everything in my power to support our community. Your trust means everything to me. With each word, the crowd grew more receptive. Laughter and applause filled the air, and as the night continued, the lines that had once divided them began to blur. By the end of the evening, even the most reluctant villagers were dancing and celebrating alongside Henry and Chidinma, their hearts open to the possibilities of their shared future. As the festivities wound down, Chidinma pulled Henry aside, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Did you see them? They're beginning to accept us. This is just the beginning, Henry. Henry nodded, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. Feel it too. We've broken down some of those walls tonight. As the stars twinkled overhead, Chidinma looked up at Henry, her heart swelling with pride. They had not only built a well but had also begun to build trust and community, paving the way for a future that held promise for everyone. Despite the celebration, not everyone in the village had fully embraced the changes. As the weeks passed, whispers began to circulate, fueled by skepticism and lingering resentment. A small group, led by the elder who had questioned Henry's motives, began to sow seeds of doubt among those who had initially been supportive. Is this really for our benefit, or are they trying to change us? One villager asked during a meeting, his voice heavy with suspicion. What do we owe to a foreigner who thinks he can come here and dictate our lives? Henry and Chidinma were aware of the murmurings, and it troubled them. They had worked hard to create a bond with the villagers, yet they now faced the daunting task of dispelling these doubts. One evening, after hearing more troubling rumors, Chidinma suggested they hold another meeting to address the concerns directly. At the meeting, Henry stood before the gathered villagers, determined to confront the shadow of doubt. I know some of you have questions about my intentions. I understand that change can be frightening, especially when it comes from someone outside your culture, he began. His words, however, were met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. One villager spoke up. You come here with your ideas and your ways. What do we gain from this? What if we lose our identity? Henry took a deep breath, realizing the weight of their concerns. I do not wish to erase your identity. I admire your culture and the strength of your community. My only goal is to offer support and create opportunities for growth. Chidinma stepped in, her voice steady and reassuring. This is not about replacing what you have. It's about enhancing it. We can learn from each other and find common ground. I have been where you are, and I know the beauty of your traditions. I want to uplift our people, not change them. But the doubts remained. The elder, who had once been a proponent of Henry's mission, stood again. How can we trust that you won't abandon us once you have what you want? We have seen outsiders come and go, and we don't want to be left behind. Henry felt a pang of sadness at the elder's words, realizing that building trust was a long journey. I understand your fears, he replied, his voice sincere. But I am here for the long haul. I have committed resources, and I will not abandon this community. We can succeed together, but I need your trust to move forward. As the meeting concluded, it was evident that while some villagers were beginning to embrace change, others remained entrenched in their skepticism. Chidinma felt the weight of their doubts, the fear that had been ingrained in the community's psyche. Later that night, as they walked home under the moonlight, she turned to Henry. What if they never come around? What if the doubts keep growing? Henry paused, looking into her eyes. Change takes time, Chidinma. We've made progress, and we can't let fear dictate our path. We'll keep working hard, and hopefully, over time, they will see our commitment and sincerity. With determination, they began to plan their next steps, brainstorming new ways to engage the community and involve them in the projects. They decided to hold workshops where villagers could share their ideas, hopes, and fears. By fostering an environment of collaboration, they aimed to dispel the shadows of doubt and build a stronger foundation for their partnership. As days turned into weeks, the challenges persisted, but so did their resolve. Henry and Chidinma continued to engage with the community, showcasing their genuine desire to support and uplift, even in the face of adversity. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but together, they held on to the hope that their love and commitment would ultimately win the hearts of their community, transforming skepticism into trust and fear into unity. The sun rose on a seemingly ordinary day in the village, but it quickly turned into one of the most challenging days for Henry and Chidinma. Rumors of a looming crisis began to circulate. The well that had been such a source of hope and joy had begun to run dry. The villagers gathered around the well, their expressions darkening as they realized the water was significantly less than it had been just days before. "Is this what we were promised?" one villager shouted, his voice laced with anger and frustration. "You said this well would provide for us, yet it is failing already." Henry stepped forward, his heart racing as the crowd's anxiety grew palpable. He had sensed that the well's water supply was dwindling but had hoped it was a temporary issue. "Please everyone, let's remain calm. I will investigate the problem and find a solution." But the crowd was not in a mood to listen. Whispers of betrayal rippled through the villagers. Chidinma felt a pang of fear as she watched the tension escalate. "Henry, they are upset," she warned, grabbing his arm. "You need to reassure them." "Gathering information is the first step," Henry insisted, turning to the villagers. "I will dig deeper to understand what's happening. If it's a matter of maintenance, we can fix it together." As he began to inspect the well, the village elder approached, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. "You claim to help us, but your promises are just empty words. We put our trust in you, and now this. How can we believe anything you say?" Henry felt a deep sense of shame wash over him. The elder's words struck a chord, and he could see the doubt clouding the faces of the villagers. They had worked so hard to build trust, and now it was slipping away like the water from the well. "Let me prove my commitment to you," Henry implored. "I will invest every resource I have to ensure this well is functional again. We can find another water source if necessary. I will not abandon you." Chidinma, sensing the rising tension, decided to step in. "Please let us work together," she urged the crowd. "This well is just the beginning. We can face this challenge as a community. Let's put our minds together and find a solution." Slowly, the villagers began to lower their voices, although the skepticism remained palpable. Henry and Chidinma spent the next few days rallying the community, organizing a meeting to brainstorm solutions. It was not easy. Many were still consumed with doubt, questioning their motives. But as they gathered to discuss their next steps, Chidinma's unwavering spirit began to ignite hope. She encouraged the villagers to share their ideas, their fears, and their solutions. "This is our community," she reminded them. "If we work together, we can overcome any obstacle." As the discussions unfolded, Henry began to see a shift in the atmosphere. Villagers who had previously harbored doubts started to contribute ideas. "We should dig deeper," suggested a young man. "Perhaps there's another layer of water below. Or we could look for alternative sources nearby," another woman chimed in. Their collaboration brought a renewed sense of purpose. The villagers, fueled by Chidinma's optimism and Henry's determination, began to unite. After hours of discussion, they devised a plan to explore nearby streams and sources while also conducting maintenance on the well. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Villagers worked side by side with Henry and Chidinma, digging, checking pipes, and scouting for other water sources. The project turned into a community endeavor, rekindling a sense of shared purpose that had been missing. Through the hard work and camaraderie, a deeper bond began to form between Henry, Chidinma, and the villagers. It was a challenging journey, but each day brought new hope, new strength, and a deeper connection between the outsider and the community he had pledged to support. As the days turned into weeks, the village began to witness significant changes. The well, after extensive repairs, started to flow again, albeit slowly. The water was still precious, but it was a beacon of hope. The villagers, who had been skeptical of Henry and Chidinma's intentions, began to see the couple in a new light. One afternoon, Henry gathered the villagers again. "We need to celebrate our progress," he declared, his enthusiasm contagious. "We've overcome a significant hurdle together. Let's have a gathering to acknowledge our efforts and strengthen our bonds." The villagers agreed, and preparations began. They organized a feast, filled with traditional foods and music that resonated through the air. On the day of the gathering, the atmosphere was alive with laughter and joy. Children danced in circles, their giggles echoing as they played under the watchful eyes of their parents. As night fell, the villagers gathered around a large fire, the flames flickering like stars against the dark sky. Henry and Chidinma shared stories of their journey, highlighting the challenges they had faced and the resilience they had found within themselves and each other. "Your hard work and commitment made this possible," Chidinma said, addressing the crowd. "We are not here to change your ways. We are here to support you, to walk beside you as you embrace progress and maintain your traditions." Henry added, "Together we can achieve great things. This community is full of potential, and I believe we can continue to grow and improve, but it requires trust and collaboration." The villagers nodded, and as the night went on, they began to share their own stories. Laughter filled the air as they reminisced about their childhoods, their dreams, and the challenges they faced. The barriers that had once separated them began to fade away, replaced by a sense of belonging and understanding. As the fire crackled, the elder who had once questioned Henry stood up. "I was wrong to doubt you," he admitted, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You have shown us the power of unity, and I can see now that your heart is in the right place. We are all learning together." His words echoed in the night, and applause erupted from the crowd. Henry felt a sense of warmth wash over him, knowing that they were finally moving toward a common goal. After the celebration, Chidinma approached Henry, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Did you see how they embraced our message? We're making progress." "Yes," Henry replied, a smile spreading across his face. "It feels like we are finally building something lasting together." Days turned into months, and the villagers began to trust Henry and Chidinma more. They formed committees to oversee projects like the water supply and the school, working hand in hand with Henry to ensure their needs were met while retaining their cultural integrity. As they collaborated, Chidinma became a bridge between the villagers and Henry, translating not just words but emotions and ideas. She was their voice, ensuring everyone felt included and heard. With each passing day, the village thrived, a testament to the power of unity and understanding. The changes were not just physical but emotional, as trust blossomed where once there had been skepticism. The villagers embraced their roles as co-creators of their future alongside Henry and Chidinma. Months later, the village stood transformed. The once barren landscape now flourished with crops and new structures that reflected a blend of traditional and modern architecture. The school had become a bustling center of learning, with children eager to embrace education, while the well continued to provide clean water, a source of pride for the community. Henry and Chidinma had worked tirelessly to integrate new ideas while respecting the village's heritage. They had established a community center where villagers could gather, share ideas, and hold workshops. The center became a hub for cultural exchange, a place where old traditions met new innovations. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the village, Henry called for a final gathering to celebrate their journey. "We've come so far together, and I want to acknowledge each and every one of you for your hard work and resilience," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "Together we have built something beautiful, and I am proud to be part of this community." Chidinma stepped forward, her heart swelling with pride. "This isn't just about us. It's about all of you. You've shown us the strength of your culture, and we've learned so much from you. Let's continue to work together to create a future that honors our past while embracing new possibilities." As the villagers cheered, the elder stood up again, his expression one of reverence. "You have taught us the importance of trust and collaboration. We were once divided by fear, but now we stand united. We welcome you as family, not as outsiders." Tears of joy filled Chidinma's eyes as she embraced the elder, overwhelmed by the acceptance they had fought so hard to achieve. "Thank you for opening your hearts to us," she whispered. That night, the village lit bonfires and danced under the stars, celebrating not just their accomplishments but the bonds they had forged. The music echoed through the trees, a melody of unity and hope. Laughter rang out, echoing the resilience of a community that had embraced change while cherishing its roots. As Henry and Chidinma watched the joyous celebrations, they exchanged glances filled with love and gratitude. They had overcome countless obstacles together. Thank you for watching. Let us know your thought in the comment and where you are watching from.